I must say, I'm super impressed with how the Jacksonville Jaguars have proceeded this offseason after a rough start. And the hiring of Tony Boselli as EVP has a lot to do with it. I'll tell you why here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. It's your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where you can find wherever you get your podcast each and every day. You can watch it or you can listen to it. Just make sure you tap in so you do not miss an episode. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about today. I've been doing player stuff all week, right? Prospects and free agents. Take a little bit of a pause from that today and talk about the other part of the team, the off the field part of the team, and that is the front office. And so in segment 3, I'll end up telling you about what it means long and short term with the changes that they've made. In the middle of the show, I'll say how it's a new day in Duval. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to win, but you have to change things if you want to get better, and you have to try. I know a lot of people say just do what you already do and just do it better and do it harder and do it with more effort. Yeah, but that hasn't been working. So we're going to take all of that effort and all of that focus, but we're going to try it with something new. I like that. And we're going to start out by talking about Tony Boselli and how it's been a home run so far. First and foremost, I know there's somebody that's going to see that and go, we ain't even seen him do nothing yet. And I'll be like, yeah, I get it. The point is just because you didn't see something doesn't mean that they aren't doing anything. So what I want you to do is take your blinders off, take that pessimism out of your voice and out of your mind, take that, well, we'll see, because it's the Jags attitude. Leave that to the haters and leave that to the national people and leave that to the naysayers. But y'all, I want y'all to focus in and lock in and think about what has happened here. What has happened there's a new day and a new way of doing things. Now, the Jags will have a new GM this weekend, right? And I know most people either want James Gladstone or Ian Cunningham, and then a lot of other people don't want Ethan Wild anywhere near it. I think that's a little bit unfair because I think everyone is, and believe me, I have been the biggest we need to start completely over guy in the world. But I don't think keeping Ethan Wild around is a thing that is a negative thing. So we'll go over that too. But you have to be impressed with the willingness to do things differently. When you haven't had a lot of success, it'd be very easy for the Jacksonville Jaguars to hire a GM that has been around the block a few times. It'd be very easy and low-hanging fruit to me for them to say, to hell with it, man, we just need to get Pete Carroll, right? We need to get Pete Carroll. And at some point during the season, I think it's probably week 4 or week 5, I'm in the press box and things are looking terrible. And I sent out a picture of Bill Belichick and answering the phone like, hey, big head, how you doing? And people got all over me about that. That was because the tendency was for the Jaguars to do something that wasn't out of the box. The tendency is to see other people's success and want to grab it and make it theirs, right? In a vacuum. And people can say, well, this is Rams Southeast. That's what they're doing now. I beg to differ. I think what they're doing now is they got a guy, yeah, he coached for the Rams at two different times. And then what he did was he took a lot of the things that he learned by being around a team that won a Super Bowl and that has been pretty successful the last 4 or 5 years. And now he's reached out to a whole bunch of people who he is familiar with, that he has intricate knowledge of, that he likes the style of play that they have, that have the same energy that he has. And I mean by Liam Cohen, right? But there's somebody lurking in the shadows, and it's hard to say lurking because he's like 6'7", right? He ain't 325 pounds no more either. He's like 6'7". He might be 225 pounds. His name's Tony Boselli, right? The only Hall of Famer, the only official Hall of Famer, there should be 2 more, but we'll get to that at some other point. The only official Hall of Famer for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tony Boselli, considered by many to be the greatest player ever. I've never thought Tony didn't love Jacksonville. I've never thought that he didn't love the Jaguars. I've always thought that, right? He really, really, really loves this city and loves this team. that in and of itself is not enough for us to say, man, he's been a home run hire. This is not some sort of stepping stone for Tony Boselli. This is a destination for Tony Boselli, right? Make no mistake about it. He hears the fans. He's not going to make decisions based on what fans say. But if you do need a thermostat, he is the perfect person who can be in a position of power and be a thermostat for what the fans want, what the feeling is, and what the atmosphere and what the temperature is in the room with the team, right? And I shout out Jacksonville for that. Jacksonville, who when I started this podcast, was right there with me. Jacksonville mentioned this yesterday, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And people can misconstrue that and think that that means that, okay, he's letting the fans run the team. No, that's not it at all. But we have always, especially me, I have talked about messaging for so long with this franchise and why part of the fans' frustration, which does affect ticket sales, part of the fans' frustration is you say one thing and it seems like y'all are doing something else. And then when we want answers, nobody's there to answer it. And then when nobody's there to answer it, then you start getting conflicting reports and you start getting rumors of dissension. And we have to have all of this speculation. We've been focusing so long on the things that don't contribute to winning that we forgot that people actually have to do their job, right? If you watch what has been going on in this GM search process and how they're doing their due diligence, and I know there's somebody that's going to sit there and say, yeah, man, well, they've always been late to hire and let things linger and all. This is not the same thing. I think in the past it came across as the Jaguars were sitting there waiting for something to fall to them. I think, and that might not be true, but that was the perception. I believe now what is happening is they are super, super deliberate. They are absolutely careful with how they are moving and how they are proceeding. If you think the Jaguars brass is going to just hire a GM this weekend and then say, okay, bring all of your books, bring everything you got on all of these players that's going to be at the combine like a day or two after you are announced as our GM, then you're probably right. That will happen. But that isn't the only thing that has happened. The other thing that has happened is, and this is the people that say, why haven't they shipped Ethan Waugh out? Who do you think has been in a capacity that since they did not have a coach or a GM, who do you think's been running those meetings, I believe, with the scouts? Who do you think has been gathering those reports and assimilating that information? Who do you think has been supervising the numerous pro scouts to look at free agents? Who do you think has been supervising how they're going to do their initial boards and where they're going to go? Who do you think was at the Senior Bowl? Who do you think are at the Shrine Bowl? Who's setting up all the itinerary, doing the things that GMs usually do? Those people are in place. That is probably Ethan Waugh, and I know for a fact that it's Tony Boselli. There are a lot of things logistically that have to be done that people take for granted to make a football team become the product that you want it to be on the weekend. So I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you why there's a new day in Duval, and I'm going to tell you why and how and point out some specific things that I have seen that makes me believe that they're either on the right track or at least they've gotten off of the wrong track and they're trying to find the right one. And we'll discuss that and more here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. I know how that is. And then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All just so you can get the most money back guaranteed. And that's what we all want. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is what Taxes is. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Segment 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. Always thanking you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, and thank you for allowing me to come into your Jaguar football psyche and life and drop some of this knowledge on you and tell you why I believe Tony Boselli has done a good job so far. I don't know if you guys realize this, because I know everyone is going to say there's some people that might think, and the reason why I keep saying, let me explain this. I say stuff like everyone is going to keep saying because that's what I've heard for 15 years, and I understand it. I don't want Jaguar fans to think that I don't understand the pessimism, or I don't understand the anxiety, or I don't know, man. I got to wait and see. I've been here. Of course I know. Of course I understand. I've been pepping y'all up during the summer and during training camp for the better part of 15 years. And with the exception of maybe 2 years in that span, there hasn't been a whole bunch for people to cheer about, right? And then you got to turn into a grief counselor. And people are like, come on, Wig. Man, we hear this every year. One thing I never, ever do is just try to sell you all tickets. I really, when I am legitimately disappointed when things don't go the way that they seem like they're going to go. But this year, I'm very, very optimistic. And the reasons why are this. The Jaguars in the past, I have always thought were too thin in the front office. When Shad, prior to him firing Trent Baalke, when they were sitting there side by side, Shad says, yeah, we'll probably add some things. We're a little thin in the front office. And when he said it, I kind of wondered, like, okay, bro, when did you realize that, right? When did you realize you were thin in the front office? I know he ain't listening to my podcast. Well, you know what? He absolutely might be. But when did you realize you needed more? They always do that in hindsight, right? And great, granted, hindsight is the perfect time to reminisce or reflect about the things that you did not do correctly. But I always wonder when they realize something, like when Doug and Trent came out and said they weren't physical enough, and I was sitting there like, oh, I've been saying it for 2 years. You wonder when did it hit you that you weren't physical enough? Isn't that something you're supposed to be? I just don't understand it. I'll give you some quotes here real quick while we're hanging around in that area. I'll give you some quotes from Liam Cohen. When Liam Cohen was discussing, he was talking to J.P. Shadrick, I believe. And I think John Osher also wrote on Jaguars.com. Make sure you go and check those things out. And please, pay attention to it, man, because these guys are being super, super transparent, and it's the best time for you to get this information. This is what Liam Cohen said, and I'm reading these quotes from him. He says, we got a lot of work to do, and one of those things, building a strong offensive lines, right? And here's the quote. I think we would all agree it needs to improve. And this is what John Osher wrote. Corden said his introductory press conference a day when he discussed multiple Jags-related topics, among them the mentality and play style of the Jaguars, and not just offensive and defensive line that must improve in the running game moving forward. All right, he goes savages. We want to be savages. Just that physical mindset. When our opponents turn on tape, what are they looking at? Are they seeing guys playing through the echo of the whistle? You might get a flag or two early, but I want them playing on the edge. Listen to me. That describes your executive vice president. That describes him to a T. In fact, it describes him so much, I'm almost willing to tell you this. I'm not saying that Liam got that from Tony, but this is a like-minded alignment. I'm almost willing to tell you, I think I've heard Tony say something like that to me before. Something very, very similar. And this is why when I heard a couple of years ago that maybe there's a future with Tony Boselli being in the front office, I was never opposed to it. And by the way, this didn't just come up this year. This is something that's been going on for a couple of years, right? Allegedly. I love that mentality. And I love the mentality, and I know it's just all talk, but I love the mentality coming from someone who, one, played that position and played it the exact way that is being described, who has basically said that to me, overall, not necessarily speaking in generalities about the Jaguars themselves, even though a little bit he did, he really, in talking football with him, that's the mentality that I want. And even the chaplain, Mo Williams, right? Who's also coaching here in high school in Providence. Shout out to Mo. I used to cut Mo's hair for about 5 years. But Mo said to me one time when I asked him what you're looking for in an offensive lineman, he said how when they finish blocking a guy, how they walk back to the huddle, how they break the huddle. And I'll attach that to something else that Liam Cohen said when he was discussing the physical, savage nature and the attitude that you have to be an offensive lineman. The fact that Tony knows and understands that, and he's looking for that not only in the coaches that they've hired, but he's looking for that in the GM. I think there's just going to be so much alignment from top all the way down through the bottom of the staff, the same energy, the same mindset. The Jaguars actually might end up becoming this physically dominant team that I have talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to flush out all of those linemen, because later on in those quotes, and like I said, go to jaguars.com and you can read it. Liam Cohen basically said, to a certain extent, yeah, we're going to add to the room, but we have some guys there that can basically do it. And that's a paraphrase. We have some guys there that can basically do it. And I think Tony might feel the same way. And I think a lot of fans feel the same way. And I don't believe that they need 5 new starters, right? I think at some point I might have said they needed 4 new starters, but I did say out of the 9 or 10 that they decide to keep, that they need to add 4 bodies. So there's ways that you can lift it from the top, you can lift it from the middle, or you can like insert talent into the middle and it pushes people out of the bottom, or you can do it from the bottom with developmental players and get rid of some of the guys that you have that are there that haven't developed and that don't fit the mantra that you want, and you can raise that up that way. I think, though, the football operations side works the exact same way. I believe that's exactly what they're doing with the influx of all of the people. Even when you look at the roster of coaches that they have, and their experience and what they've done. Now, in the NFL, when you read resumes like that, everybody's resume is going to be up to par for the most part because they've all done things. But I'm just talking about the specifics of where they were and how those teams played, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I am just enamored with the hope that this franchise has moving forward because of, here's that word again, the alignment in the philosophy of toughness, of savage play, of violence. You keep hearing, if you look at Anthony Campanile, you might not be surprised that you hear that kind of stuff. Dude looks like he works out all the time. And this ain't no shot at Liam, because I look like I don't work out all the time, because I don't. But regardless of the nice guy image, and I think he's a very nice man too, with a great family, he understands the assignment. The assignment here is you need to beat people in. This is a violent game, man. This is violence here. You need people that basically you might be afraid to speak to sometimes, right? You need people that are just dogs, especially when it comes to preparation, especially when it comes to gameplay. And every time I say that, I keep going back to remembering my days when I covered this team when I was very, very young. Well, I wasn't very young. I was younger. That's exactly who Boselli was. Gentle giant away. My wife loves him to death. Every time he sees her, they talk and boom, boom, boom. But then I would see him at practice, and I would see a focus. And then I would see him at game day, and I would see a focus. I think those are the same characteristics that he's carrying into that building. So when you say, Wig, maybe you're making a little bit too much of this connectivity thing, I want you to ask yourself this. If Trent Baalke was still the GM, do you think things would be going the way they're going? If he was still the GM, do you believe this GM search would have all of those hot names over there, all of those guys on Zoom? Do you think it would have been 10 people wide? Do you think they would have reduced it to 5? Do you think it would be these young, energetic guys, or would maybe Trent look at those guys like, oh, they don't know anything. I've been around here forever. They're young guys. They're just young dudes. Like I've seen it in the media where people have looked at. I was never looked at that way, even though I do podcasts, because I was indoctrinated a little bit with the old way, right? when you did this all the time, when you wrote stuff. And if you can't see me, I'm holding up a pen and a pad about when you had to write everything down, because I did this. I was doing radio back in 2001. So my thing is I was kind of under the old way, but I was still young enough and hip enough, if I could say it. I shouldn't even say hip, since I had one replaced and the other one was terrible. But I will tell you this, I saw the new way coming in. I think the Jaguars have a right mix of people, and Tony Boselli, being an old school football player, but sees the new direction of Liam Cohen. I just think there's been so much alignment with this franchise since they decided to do things differently. And this is all, man, this all happened after Shad Khan. This all happened after Shad Khan sat there with Trent Baalke, and I came out and said he was the worst owner in the league. All of this stuff has changed just because of the new structure, the new way of doing business. And that's why I always said it was never a personal thing with Trent Baalke. That was just his way of doing things. But that way no longer was going to work. And I can't even ever say it worked for him as the general manager of any franchise. But even if you thought, he just hadn't had his day yet, that was not going to work in today's National Football League. The bottom line is they have been talking about being big and physical and having all of these traits. And guess what? They are one of the least most physical football teams in the National Football League. So you can talk one way, but if you don't know how to execute it and do it, then it's not going to work. The question is, will it work? The answer is, I don't know. If I had to place a bet on FanDuel, I would probably say, yes, it will. But it doesn't mean it has to work. I'll tell you what it means long and short term, and whether or not what they've done will actually end up meaning victories and long-term success. We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off, or we want to be on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment 3 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. Thanking you for making us your first listen. That's what I'm doing. My name is Tony Wiggins, Duval native, Duval to the bone gristle. Want this team to do so good for the people in the city. Man, I don't know what to do. And I'm telling you, I'm feeling optimistic. I'm feeling optimistic, and I'm not just talking about instant success in the win and loss column, although that's not something that I'm saying won't happen. But I am more or less talking about success in another way, and that is changing the narratives and changing the outlook for a franchise that, for the most part, when they did have success here in Jacksonville, it always feels like they fell into it. And the reason why it feels like they fell into it is because it was short-lived, right? 2017, 2022, it was very, very short. 2023, rather. It was very, very short-lived. And it just did not last. Was it 2022? Let's say 20. Yeah, it was 2022, not 2023. The years the bad years just come by and go by so fast that you don't even remember when it was, right? It just seems like they just all stack up and they all look alike. The thing about this is, I'm not telling you that this year they're going to make a run at the Super Bowl. I'm not telling you they're not either. But what I am saying is you had to change it. And the changes are not just like putting icing on a cake that isn't done. The changes came from deep inside. It came from a place of not being afraid to be transparent about your shortcomings, not being afraid to know what you needed to do to move forward in the new NFL. And how you heard Shad say he talked to players. You heard guys like Jarian Jones say, maybe, somebody more energetic that understands how we want to do things. So to that credit, it has always been more than just Trent Baalke. It was also the coaching staff. You don't really know that until guys are brave enough to say something, and that more than one thing can be true at one time. It was the coaching staff, it was the thin front office, it was the direction. You're actually asking less capable people to do more with less, and it doesn't make sense. Baalke wasn't a very good GM, in my opinion. I don't think he was terrible, but the goal isn't to just be okay. The goal is to try to win a title at some point and have sustained excellence. I never thought he was that kind of guy, but you're asking him to do it with a thin staff. That's hard, man. And then you're asking him to do it with a coach, and you're asking the coach to do it with him under those same circumstances. It's all too difficult. Now what it feels like is you're not asking a GM to do something in spite of the fact that it doesn't match with the coach. You're not asking a coach to do something and he doesn't really match with the GM, which means the coach and the philosophy and the scheme aren't going to match with the players. You're not asking them both to report to you and not have somebody in place to be able to iron all of that stuff out and present it to you in a package, and you can turn around and present it back to them on direction and how we need to go. It's almost as if, hold on, watch this, they lack leadership, right? And when you lack leadership, that means you lack a pilot. And when you lack a pilot, you lack direction. And there was no direction, I believe, for the franchise. It was all, and we've heard this term before, it was all throw something against the wall and see what sticks, and then that's the direction we'll go. I think when you set your course, you have to be extremely deliberate. When you're on your way somewhere, you got to know exactly how you're going to get there. And that doesn't mean you ain't going to take a detour every now and then. But at the very least, from the beginning, you have to have a plan. And that plan has to be defined. And that's how you create an identity. And that's how you create a connection with the fans in the city that is unbreakable. This is how you create something where all of these people kind of move in lockstep, right? So instead of you talking to this guy and then talking to that guy and then them trying to talk to somebody else, and then this guy's on the field coaching when he should be over here GMing, now you're not going to see that. What you're going to see now is coaches doing their job, the front office doing their job, the EVP doing his job, and it's all the same job. Everybody just has the different delegations and different authority within that. And that's what I feel has happened to the Jaguars this offseason. Everything that they do, say, it sounds similar. When you think about the people that are doing it, you look at Liam Cohen's track record. They've been able to move people on the offensive line. He's been able to design offense for quarterbacks that people have thought were done. He's made quarterbacks look way better than a lot of people thought they could. He has a very, very interesting coaching style. He's gotten guys from teams that have the same like-minded coaching style where they believe in physical violence, they believe in speed, they believe in running to the ball, but more importantly, they believe in teaching and they believe in having a certain energy every day. And that also includes the front office that is now buffed up a little bit with Tony Boselli helping lead the way and guide them through not only the hiring of the coaches, but now the hiring of a GM that maybe by the time I come on tomorrow, I will announce who it is. If not, we'll do an emergency pod this weekend and let you know who that is. But I can tell you right now, whoever it is, I guarantee you when you hear him speak, he's going to sound just like all of these assistants, just like Liam Cohen, just like the EVP. And that is going to be the voice of the team. We shouldn't depend on Shad. Remember, we used to want to hear from Shad all the time. We're getting to the point where we ain't going to even want to have to hear from Shad anymore because we're going to hear from everybody else, and we're going to know that hearing from everybody else is hearing from Shad Khan. So I think long-term, the Jaguars are setting themselves up to be the kind of franchise that you can be proud of and glad to be a part of. That you're going to be happy that the city has designated the type of commitment they have to our new stadium that they're building. Short term, I don't know. We'll have to see. But I do think that there will be an improvement in the way that they present themselves on the field each and every Sunday. You'll see more competence. And you'll see a team that is playing together instead of trying to figure out themselves what it is they need to be doing. All right, I can tell you what you need to do. You need to tap into Locked On NFL twice a day. Tyler Rowland in the morning. And I'm going to tell you something. I see the numbers. I know some of y'all are looking, and some of y'all aren't. But go ahead and make sure you tap into the NFL, Locked On NFL. Tyler Rowland early in the morning is like a double shot of espresso. And me, well, I'm a barber, so you know what you're going to get from me. You're going to get the barbershop at about 2 o'clock each and every day on Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch or listen. Tap in, man. We'll be back with a show tomorrow where we'll talk about those trenches, unless they make a hire with the general manager's position. But other than that, thank you for tapping in to Locked On Jaguars, and we'll see you next time.